Good day, everyone. Right, I said last night that I would carry on with this Met Police, this report about Baroness Casey, that Baroness Casey did into the Met Police. Now, I have decided that what I'm going to do is do this analysis, which is the evidence to support the conclusions, primarily because conclusions to me come last. So, now, the last thing we did was dip sample case study 7 misconduct cases, which was just ugh. Now it goes on. Number 5 in the analysis says the Met Police does not fully support or resource local professional standards units, PSUs, to enable them to deal with misconduct effectively. Great. So, what? Why? A large proportion of misconduct cases are handled by the many local PSUs based in individual commands rather than the Central Directorate of Professional Standards, the DPS, handling lower level conduct cases alongside public complaints. In the last 2 years, the PSUs have dealt with the majority of misconduct allegations, and yet PSUs are overstretched and under-resourced. There is very little training for PSUs. There is a high turnover of staff, and as detectives are not permitted to work in local PSUs, there is also a lack of investigatory capacity. I'm sorry. Why? I'd like to know the reason why detectives are not permitted to work in local PSUs. What? What? I said there's a quote here. PSUs are like the dumping ground for staff. It's not a place where people aspire to end up chief superintendent. More generally, we were told that locally supervisors did not have access to the tools that would help them join up issues and identify troubling patterns of behaviour. BSUs do not have access to the Met's Centurion misconduct data system or information about an officer that might help put together a picture of risks such as declarable associations or business interests. So, they don't need any information at all, and yet there are so many of these no case to answer cases. What? HMI CFRS has identified the professional standards operating model within the Met as a cause for concern. In blue it says, an inspector told us of his attempts to refer a case for misconduct on the grounds of a lack of integrity and lying. A wall of silence followed. It was referred back to him not as misconduct but as performance issue. Sorry, lack of integrity and lying is a performance issue. Okay. The inspector persisted and uncovered serious criminality and referred the case back and was phoned by DPS saying, "What are you doing? This is not your job." After 2 months, the case had still not been opened. We are not listened to as managers when we raise concerns. Why? What the fuck is going on? Who've we got in charge of our police? Are these people who actually know how policing works? What the fuck? We also heard that the relationship between the DPS and the PSUs, whose staff are managed locally by chief inspectors, is not always clear, with a lack of transparency on decision making. We heard that frustration from those working in PSUs that decisions were often left for them to justify locally with little or no information themselves on the justification or background. Yeah, great. So if it's actually taken to a higher court and they're asked, did you have did you have proper justification for this? They're like, well, we had the justification we could get. That's not good enough. What? That's nowhere near good enough. The PSUs dealing with the majority of conduct issues in the Met. Their capacity, capability and independence is crucial to enabling BSUs and OCUs to take responsibility for their own officers and staff. Fucking right. Evidence suggests that a small cadre of Met officers and staff with a pattern of serious and repeated conduct issues which are not being picked up early enough, if at all, and they do put that in there in brackets. This in turn has an impact on internal confidence in the misconduct system as officers and staff see poor and repeated behaviour go unchallenged. This just reminds me of all the reports that were coming out of government underneath Boris Johnson. Without a functioning, dedicated team to investigate and thread together these patterns at an earlier stage, this risk will continue regardless of improvements in reporting practices. Because there is now a deep set problem rooted in there, without someone going in there and literally firing everyone and then hiring people on a sound basis, which would leave the country very unprotected, I don't know what we could do. This is ridiculous. You need to fully fund and resource a specific team to go into the Met Police and literally undo all of the fucking bullshit. You see someone of the top, even if he's a top wig, being a bell end, and you know, generally, you know, showing that their conduct is not that of what the Met is supposed to show or supposed to be, then boot him out. There's no misconduct, fuck them off. By their standards, they are fucking abysmal. By their own standards. And that, it doesn't seem like there is any standards, which is ridiculous. Number 6, the Met is not clear about what constitutes gross misconduct and what will be done about it. In our quantitative engagement with Met officers and staff, we have been repeatedly told that staff and officers want colleagues removed from the police for unacceptable behaviour and are frustrated with the Met's inability to do so. Why? What? We heard accounts that the DPS has told people raising misconduct issues that unless an officer is convicted of a criminal offence, it will be hard to remove them for gross misconduct. This is something that I think needs to be dealt with when it comes to MPs as well. I don't like this at all. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, we can't, apparently, unless that, you know, there's a criminal offence or they have been recalled for more than 10 days or something, then we can only then can we recall our MPs. I think that rule needs to be changed, and in a similar vein, so it really needs to change here in the same vein with the police, because saying that unless an officer is convicted of a criminal offence, it would be hard to remove them for gross misconduct. Then how do they do it in other businesses? How do they do it across other public services? Is this bad across all public services? It's disgusting. A couple of quotes in blue. I'm losing good staff because they say, how am I sitting next to a guy who bullied me or exposed himself? A senior police staff. Another one. We don't want this behaviour in the Met. If we worked for Tesco, we'd be able to sack someone for less. BCU inspector. That's exactly what I was just talking about. Other businesses are more stringent than this. Another one. Stories I've heard of what people have done and should be kicked out of the job but haven't. That's why I'm not confident things will be done. That was a DC, a detective constable. It's ridiculous. The key issue raised around this concern was the threshold for determining whether a conduct issue should be gross misconduct and therefore grounds for dismissal is too high. What? Set a standard! Set a square standard! With, specific exceptions. Fuck's sake. The definition of gross misconduct is a breach of the standards of professional behaviour is so serious that dismissal will be justified. This appears to provide wide scope for interpretation, although national guidance and case law have set some parameters for how this can be interpreted. I'm sorry, you need to not just set some parameters, set parameters. My God. While it is important that any procedures are fair and reasonable to the officer against whom the allegations are made, this is also a good point, because there are cases of false allegations. The evidence we have seen and heard in our review shows a tolerance of serious breaches. So what in the last video, it showed the dip samples and several examples of egregious behaviour by police staff over and over again, and nothing happened, or what constitutes to nothing. And these people are still serving in the police service. Fuck's sake. BCU officers have told us about their disagreement with DPS around the threshold from this. So, DPS is a big problem. It seems that DPS needs a serious magnifying glass put upon it. In blue again, someone will swear, shout and bully and just get words of advice. I've had to push someone to get someone on a written warning and cannot get over the threshold. That is where the bar is so low. It's almost like this behaviour is expected and we tolerate it. And that's again from senior police staff. This is at a level I cannot believe. And again, it just reminds me of... Oh, what was her fucking name? That report into Boris Johnson's and his government's conduct throughout the pandemic. This is what this reminds me of. And I know this has been going on longer than that, but it seems it got worse after Boris Johnson took over. And not just when the pandemic hit, from 2018, 2019 onwards. Another one, I fought tooth and nail with the DPS to get things bumped up on gross misconduct, and that was a sergeant. Why would you want to become a police officer unless you're extremely masochistic at this point? Surveys conducted or extremely optimistic. Surveys conducted in 2 BCU by BCU management teams who wanted to better understand the scale and extent of sexism and misogyny in order to tackle the problems and sorry about that. Fuck's sake. Misogyny in order to tackle the problems, highlighted some of the behaviours and some of the behaviours officers and staff are putting up with on a daily basis. In one BCU, the survey found that 22% of public protection officers (PPOs) who responded, and 37% of those who responded in emergency response and patrol team (ERPT) had experienced unwanted sexual advances or touching. This isn't an endemic problem. The Tories have always been about less regulation. And whilst they've been in recent times making a big hoo-ha about it, it seems that this has been going on ever since they came in with the Lib Dems. This is disgusting. In the other BCU, 47% of female employees who responded to a survey said they had experienced sexism and misogyny in the last 6 months. In the comments, and that's probably the only those that wanted to say anything. In the comments, many expressed shock and anger about the level of inappropriate sexual comments they experienced. I'm not fucking surprised. Here's a quote. I heard on so many occasions male and some female colleagues passing on sexualized comments when addressing members of the public, victims, very upsetting, witnesses, suspects and female colleagues. And I'm guessing that their cams are just not working or they don't have them. Being told that if you fell asleep on a night shift, then you couldn't claim that there was no consent to unwanted sexual touching. No! No. You're on the job, you bellend. And no anyway. You're... What? You're a police officer. This is even worse. Many also talked about not feeling confident to report their line managers and supervisors who in some cases joined in. If officers and staff do not have the faith in the independence, rigour and fairness of the misconduct system, these sorts of behaviours will continue to be tolerated and encouraged. Exactly right. Couple more quotes. It was so confusing that all of this is going on and no one in line management team would think nothing of it. To the contrary, they would join in with the sexual comments, sexual degrading of female officers. Oh, that's just dabby double dozy, isn't it? Thanks, Mr. Simple. That's ridiculous. Would line managers do something about it? Of course they would not. They would join in and encourage swearing. Incredible. This is ridiculous. Again, the title of these videos has been "The Met Police has no standards." I wanted to write pretty much none, but it seems that they just have no standards. It's hard for me to say as a non-absolutist. It really is. Number 7. There is racial disparity throughout the Met's misconduct system. What a shock. This review has reached a conclusion found in several research pieces that precede it. Which anyone who tries to say that Britain doesn't have institutionalised racism at this point can go fuck themselves. I don't care if you're also black. There are a lot of people that, or dark skinned or whatever. I'm not racist. If that was taken as racist, apologies. This wasn't supposed to be. But if you're of black, Asian mixed ethnicity, or even of traveller, or any other minority white ethnicity, which is undervalued, being of a pagan culture, like, it's not a surprise that people are still saying that racism is institutionalized in this country. But you will get these people who denial is very comfortable for them. Like, it's their comfortable retreat. Just deny. It's comfortable. Anyway, and that the misconduct system is evidence of racial disparity, and as reported in previous studies, several reasons are cited for this, which are reflected in testimony from black, Asian, and mixed ethnicity officers and staff. This included the concern that raising issues related to racism or other discrimination and wrongdoing often led to being labelled as troublemaker, which then led to unfair disciplinary action. We also heard that the misconduct system is not sufficiently robust, while with white officers who reach professional standards, but there is a lower threshold for black, Asian, and mixed ethnicity officers and staff. Again, what a shock! It does not surprise me that this is the case. It is absolutely disgusting. And again, if you look at the map, if you look at these maps, you see that it gets worse. Under Boris Johnson, it gets worse. I'm not saying he's the root problem, but it cannot just be a coincidence. And it's not just because I have a pathological hatred towards that lying fat foreigner. I'm not being xenophobic here. And I'm stating a fact. He's a lying fat foreigner. He's not British. He's American. This included a concern This issued the concern that raising issues relating to racism or other discrimination and wrongdoing often led to being labelled as a troublemaker, which then led to unfair disciplinary action. We also heard that the misconduct system is not sufficiently robust, with white officers. We also heard that there may be a reluctance among supervisors to address low-level incidents for fear of being labelled as racist and being passed up into the misconduct system themselves. So, oh my God, this is really fucking stupid. Wow. I can't believe this. If you look at, again, if you get hold of the PDF for this, and it's the analytical report evidence to support, so it's on the Met Police. Yeah, so it's the Baroness Casey report, and it's the analytical report. And we're down at page 16, top of page 16. And these graphs, these line graphs show, bar graphs show that anyway, the figures show that it gets worse. Actually does. And it's not like this is coming from biased sources either. Like they're getting this, and whilst this is, they say that this is as best as they can get. They said at the beginning, in the last video, at the beginning of the report, it says that the details in this report are the best that they could get because the Met Police analysis of itself is that shite. And I'm paraphrasing. It's ridiculous. In every year of data, Black, Asian and mixed ethnicity officers are substantially more likely than their white colleagues to receive a misconduct allegation. In the most recent financial year, black officers and staff were 81% more likely to receive a misconduct allegation than their white colleagues. Asian officers and staff were 55% more likely, and mixed ethnicity staff were 41% more likely. And that's proportionally higher if you look at the graphs than it was for the previous decade. It's ridiculous. And that wasn't great either. But this is even worse. It should be noted that this is an improvement from 2013 to 2014. Okay, yeah, no, see, this is that also I was going to say. There's no clear pattern of improvement from one year to the next. So I'll read it in situ. So it should be noted that this is an improvement from 2013 to 2014, where black officers and staff were twice as likely as white officers to receive an allegation. But there is no clear pattern of improvement from one year to the next. Although some years show less disproportionality to in misconduct allegation than others, there is no clear reduction in disproportionality over time, with black officers and staff consistently more likely than their white officers to receive an allegation. Consistently. Stop saying to us that the country's not racist. We need to come to terms with this. As allegations move through the misconduct process into decision making, the disproportionality shrinks. However, we have found that in every year from 2013 to 14 to 2018-19, black officers and staff are more likely than their white colleagues to have misconduct allegation given a case to answer decision and therefore have sanctions justified. This is the same. The same is true for Asian officers and staff relative to their white colleagues, with the exception of 2017 to 18. It is notable that there is no disproportionality in public complaints against police officers, i.e. that black, Asian and mixed ethnicity officers are no more likely to receive complaints than their white counterparts. And again, when it comes to decisions made, like it it seems to get better from 2013-14 to 16-17, then drops almost back to its original bullshit, with unknowns starting to creep in 2017-18. Going into the year Boris Johnson, going into the 2018-2019 financial year, it improves slightly, but once again, 2019-2020 financial year, Boris Johnson's year of coming into power proper, it dropped again. It started to rise, and then it fell even further. Not only that, but in that time that Boris Johnson's been in charge of the country, and he said about that drive for more police officers. the red thing, which is on this graph, which is for unknowns, has risen dramatically, which is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. There aren't even any discontinuances this year. Like none. Or last financial year. None. It's ridiculous. And last year was only 1%. This year it completely dropped off. And in terms of cases to answer, in the years that Boris Johnson was in charge, it dropped right off. This year it dropped to 8. It dropped last year. 23% of cases were a case to answer for misconduct. This year only 8%. But in that, you've also got 62% of that number is unknown. It's stupid. It says here, after the 2018-2019, the proportion of incomplete allegations unresolved is too large to compare the proportions of other outcomes. I wonder what that means. Figure 12 shows the decision made on every allegation made against a white officer or staff in each year, and it's, yeah. Figure 13 shows the decision made in every year made against a black officer. I'm just going to compare it. It's even worse. There are more no cases to answer for the what, and it's worse under Boris Johnson's government. It steadily got worse, and you can see it in the graphs. And it's the same for Asians. Like compared to what the Brits get, actually the Asian one is a little bit more similar, but it's still less. Yeah, it does. It shows racism. It actually shows in these graphs that there is institutional racism. Well, that's my conclusion in any case. After 2018-2019, the proportion of allegations which have not yet received a case to answer is too large to reliably compare the averages. However, for allowing for that caveat, the disparity appears to be reducing further in 2019-2020. This is an area where both the Met and the Mayor's Office for Policing Crime have taken action. So the disproportionality between it dropped a little bit. Yeah. But the unknowns, that's really, this is bad. This is really bad. But yeah, have taken action, and the MOPAC are working on analysis which compares the outcomes of finalised misconduct allegations from 2018 to 2020 with a focus on understanding any drivers of disproportionality. But again, it's like they stopped reading a bunch of these reports. See, there's the proportion of incomplete or unresolved allegations is too large to compare the proportions of other outcomes, which is why we see the case to answer percent for all ethnic groups drop significantly, which says to me, and I could be wrong, but it says to me what that means is they were reading that they stopped. They kind of went, nope, not going to do so many, and we're only going to do this much, and we're going to show how we're going to skew the results this way. That's what it seems. The percentage Figure 15 shows the percentage of all allegations against white officers and staff resulting in a case to answer decision in each financial year by ethnic group, black, Asian and white only. This is not a pattern in the difference between the lower white line and other lines. Yeah, no, I get that. Despite these signs of progress, there remains evidence of racial disparity throughout the misconduct system. White officers and staff continue to fare better than their black, Asian and mixed ethnicity counterparts. Again, like, I'm trying to be surprised by that, and I'm not. 8. Regulation 13 is not being used fairly or effectively in relation to misconduct. Regulation 13 of the Police Regulations 2003 allows for probationary officers who are not suitable to be police officers to be removed in a separate and more flexible way than the formal misconduct process. We heard multiple concerns about challenges in using Regulation 13, including the amount of paperwork required, fear about employment tribunals, and the need to provide clear and incontrovertible evidence of problems. We also heard that the rotation arrangements whereby a probationary police constable receives a probationary PC serves 6 months on the team, then moves on to another team, which means problem behaviour is not identified or is passed on to the next supervisor. Now, this is ridiculous. We had many examples of unacceptable behaviour going unchecked for long periods, including cases where officers had lied on their vetting. What? Failed their exams, and if they're failing their exams, why are they getting in? And I'm going to tell you why. Boris Johnson. Again, the usage of this spikes more at the first spike is in August 2019. That's like during Boris Johnson's first tenure. And it spikes again and again. It gets worse and worse under Boris Johnson's government. It's ridiculous. We heard many examples of unacceptable behaviour going unchecked for too long, failed their exams and had been involved in misconduct issues and were still not being removed. It's just, again, no standards. Often, these examples are well known locally by officers and staff, and the lack of effective action both further undermines confidence in the Met's ability to deal with poor behaviour and harms the reputation of the new intake. Due to the uplift in police numbers and despite these challenges, the use of Regulation 13 has been going up in line with and beyond the increase of probationers. So I am going to blame Boris Johnson's push for more police officers in such a short time. Well, adequate training. And what's the betting? Being Tories, they removed a bunch of regulations. Or ignored them. It's really depressing. However, in most cases of Regulation 13 result in no further action, and only 8% of cases in 2019 to 20 and 4% in 18 to 19 led to dismissal. It's ridiculous. This year, it seems, where the mayor has gone, this is like, he's actually been shown the evidence of what's going on. It's like, this is not happening anymore. So he set up this team, and it's dealing a lot more with this. There are a lot more in progress towards this year. But there has to be. if there is evidence to show that Boris Johnson's tenure had nothing to do with the spike in these cases, fair enough. I will change my opinion. I feel there's an unshakable feeling here that Boris Johnson's drive for 20,000 new police officers had some big problem here, had some big contributing factor here. While dismissals are low, we have heard, and the data confirms that many probationers have involved in Regulation 13 case will end up resigning, which is to be expected. In 2021-22, Regulation 13 resignations represented 41% of all probationary resignations. However, the data shows that female and BME probationers are disproportionately resigning. So, again, there's a racial problem going on here. As well as resignations, we found that racial disproportionality in the use of Regulation 13 is much more pronounced in the misconduct system, with black and Asian probationers more than twice as likely to have a Regulation 13 case raised than their white colleagues. Figures 19 and 20 show us that compared to the 2019 2000 to 2022 cohort of PCs and DCs with 2 or less years of service, black officers are 126% more likely to subject a regulation to be subject to a Regulation 13 case than white officers. So, under Boris Johnson's tenure, the racist disparity has gotten worse. And it gives links to where they get this stuff. So, Home Office 2002 police misconduct statistics, and they got their website there. London Policing Ethnic Panel review of special case hearings in the Metropolitan Police Service in 21. Operation Rainier Learning Report HMI CFRS 2022 inspection of the Metropolitan Police Service and inspection of the Metropolitan Police Service's counter-corruption arrangements and other matters related to the Daniel Morgan Independent Panel. So it's not just this. What we've also got is, where is it? Back. No, where is it? Terms of reference, privacy notice, commissioner. Letter to the commissioner. So look. Dear Samar, congratulations on your appointment as commissioner. Okay. So that she congratulates the appointment of the new commissioner. She agrees that she will continue to work as under the same thing that Cresta the Dick wanted. Then Cresta asked me to look at the internal misconduct system as a priority. Yes, I agreed to do so, as I believe that how the Met deals with internal misconduct is a fundamental concern for Met officers and staff. Throughout the months of meetings and interviews, I have reiterated this point to me. Exactly. Londoners too need to have confidence that the Met can effectively police itself, protect the public, and provide a positive career experience for people of all backgrounds in on the year. Okay. In summary, my conclusion is that the misconduct system is not delivering in a way that you, I, your officers, or the public would expect it to. The cases are taking too long to resolve, allegations are more likely to be dismissed than acted upon, the burden of those raising concerns is too heavy, and there is a racial disparity across the system, with white officers dealt with less harshly than black or Asian officers. Initiatives such as Cigna and Not in My Met are positive, but the misconduct system itself needs to change if these well-intentioned campaigns and actions are to have any substantial impact. Our analysis has identified 8 key issues. 1. The Met takes too long to resolve misconduct cases. On average, the Met takes 400 days to finalise misconduct allegations from start to finish. Even removing those involving the independent office from police conduct, cases still take on average nearly 350 days. Nearly 20% of misconduct cases take more than 2 years to finalise. Number 2, officers and staff do not believe that action will be taken when concerns around conduct are raised, and they are right to do so, as consistently 55 to 60% of misconduct allegations are made by Met Police officers, staff, and their families receiving no case to answer decision, which is ridiculous. Line managers and supervisors are warning staff against taking misconduct action, so that the view that nothing happens is institutionalized. And there's that institutionalized. 3. Allegations relating to sexual misconduct and other discriminatory behaviours are less likely than other misconduct allegations to result in a case to answer decision. Case to answer decisions are given a 20% of allegations are given to 20% of allegations concerned with breaching equality and diversity rules. 29% of allegations involving sexual misconduct compared to 33% of all finalised allegations. This suggests that equality and discrimination issues are not being tackled effectively. Number 4. The misconduct process does not find and discipline officers with repeated or patterns of behaviour or patterns of unacceptable behaviour. Between 2013 and 2022, 20% of officers and staff in the misconduct system have been involved in 2 or more cases, but the data shows that less than 1% of those officers have been dismissed. This is ridiculous. The current approach to misconduct only allows for allegations to be dealt with individually, and as far as we can see, connections are not made prior to prior concerns raised which fall short of formal misconduct. This means repeated or escalated misconduct is not spotted, missing those who potentially pose most risk to others. As I said, it's like, where are the fucking standards? Number 5. So speaking of fucker, the Met does not fully support local professional standards units to deal with misconduct effectively. Many misconduct cases are handled by local PSUs working in individual commands rather than the Central Directorate of Professional Standards, the DPS. It is my view that PCUs are overstretched, under-resourced, and do not receive training in misconduct, undermining local efforts to improve standards of behaviour. Greater authority and support should be given to PCSUs as a matter of urgency. A matter of urgency, people. 6. The Met is not clear about what constitutes gross misconduct and what will be done about it. Again, no standards. The Met threshold and interpretation for what counts as gross misconduct is set way too high, meaning that too many of those who fall short of what the public would expect cannot be removed. In addition to this, where a case to answer for gross misconduct is found, the number of those actually dismissed has fallen significantly in recent years. There's racial disparity throughout the Met's misconduct system. Despite improvement, it was still the case in 2021-22 that black officers and staff were 81% more likely than white officers, as said earlier, to have misconduct allegations brought against them. While Asian officers were 55% more likely, black and Asian officers were more likely to have an allegation substantiated than white officers. This is a long-standing issue and is clear evidence of systemic bias. In other words, systemic racism, institutionalized racism. Stop lying to us. Not these people, but the media. Number 8. Regulation 13 is not being used fairly or effectively in relation to misconduct. What a shock. Regulation 13, which allows for the removal of probationers, is not being used to remove enough of those officers who should not be in policing, with only 8% of cases in the most recent year resulting in dismissal. Regulation 13 is also, however, being used disproportionately on those from ethnic minorities, with black officers being 126% more likely and Asian officers 123% more likely to be subject to Regulation 13 case than white officers. Ridiculous. Further to these 8 issues, I also want to stress 4 broader points. And firstly, that these issues are not new. The data we found had access to dates from 2013 to 2022. In addition, there are numerous reports and recommendations on many of the issues raised in this letter that go back decades, and including the key matter of racial disproportionality. So yes, plenty of this has been going on for far too long, but it got worse. In the last couple of years, and not just due to the pandemic. In addition, there are numerous reports and recommendations on many of the issues raised in this letter that go back to a year. In the light of that and their concerning nature, it is all the more important that you, as the new commissioner, and your new leadership team grip this and take the necessary action by making urgent and effective improvements, not incremental reform. Secondly, that the DPS itself does not fully command the confidence of officers and staff and requires significant change to do so. Colleagues in the DPS also report how challenging and difficult their jobs are, and an enhanced DPS alone with a business as usual approach will risk making the issues outlined above even worse. Across the Met, it is apparent that the burden placed on those raising allegations is far too heavy and needs to be lightened by more confident management. Radical reform is required here based on root and branch overhaul to the system. And an early start would be to enhance the approach taken by the Domestic Abuse and Sexual Offences team established in February 2022 and under the Rebuilding Trust Programme. Thirdly, I am concerned about the pressures on the front line in the BCUs and within that about line management and supervision within the Met. An issue also recently raised by His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services. These are the first and most critical opportunities in setting, embedding, and enforcing professional standards. HR does not have, or human resources, does not have a big enough role in the misconduct system or in supporting line managers. Improving these will help prevent misconduct in the first place and help some low-level cases from escalating, as well as encouraging quicker and more effective action where necessary. I will be returning to this issue in my future full report. So we're going to get an even more in-depth report onto this. Fuck's sake. Fourthly, I recognise that that some improvements will rely on overall regulatory changes that affect policing nationally and not just the Met. The decline in dismissals for gross misconduct has coincided with the introduction of independent legally qualified chairs at the misconduct hearings, although we do not have data available to know whether there is a causal connection. In addition, the overly complex quasi-judicial nature of the system makes it more akin to a criminal justice process with higher evidential bar than an internal system which is supposed to uphold high professional standards and maintain public confidence in the police service. Again, police service, not force. The legal and regulatory framework regarding misconduct should be looked at urgently by the new Home Secretary. She won't, because she's a bitch. Together with the College of Policing and National Police Chiefs Council, you do not have the powers you need for the radical reform needed on all these issues, but as you've acknowledged, these changes need not stand in the way of many of the other urgent improvements that can and should be made in the Met now, irrespective of regulations. These improvements are ultimately for you to decide upon, but in my assessment, they must include action on. They must include action to reduce time taken for cases to be resolved, to investigate and remove more repeat offenders, to bring more offences, particularly relating to discrimination and sexual misconduct, within the remit of gross misconduct and dismissal, to bring in more human resource expertise to support the misconduct process, to review the use of Regulation 13, the regulation used to dismiss, for dismissal, to better support PSUs to effectively resolve more cases at local level, and to review and reduce disproportionality throughout the system. A piecemeal approach to these issues is unlikely to work. Radical and wholesale reform of the system is required to increase both public confidence in the Met and internal confidence in the misconduct process. Accountability for achieving them also needs to be held at the highest level of the Met. I realise that for many in the Met, this letter, the report and its contents will make for difficult reading. Yeah, fucking right. I would ask that the organisation pause and consider it carefully rather than finding reasons to avoid facing up to the uncomfortable truth. And what's the betting that there are already a bunch of them doing that? I mean, the government have already started doing that. Boris Johnson was famous for doing that. Since I have been with you at the Met, I have been struck by how many outstanding and tirelessly hard-working officers there actually are. At the same time, I've seen for myself, as has the public, some of the truly awful conduct of officers going through the misconduct and criminal justice system. They may be a minority, but what they have said and done is laid bare publicly and is a cause for shame. You owe it to the outstanding and hard-working officers to get this right and reform the system for the long term. Finally, while I completely understand and support the urgency with which you want to begin reforming the Met, and the importance of dealing fairly and effectively with misconduct too, that I would also caution you that these issues within the misconduct processes are just one part of the wider system that needs to get that together that makes up the standards and culture within the organisation. I will be returning to these wider issues forthwith. There will be a lot of work to do, and I do not underestimate the challenges ahead. I am also clear, however, that for all its problems, there are many thousands of Met officers and staff who do an extraordinary job every day for our city, putting their own lives and safety at risk, delivering an often outstanding service, and who want to work to the highest standards. I therefore commit myself to supporting them and your efforts to achieve those standards. London and Londoners deserve nothing less. As ever, Dent Casey of Bloodstock, the Baroness Casey of Bloodstock, DBCB. Right now, that is abysmal, and it does remind me of the report into what was going on in Downing Street. Similar culture, and it's no wonder that the police were complained about. Well, one of the things that were being complained about on that one. It's ridiculous. This is actually stupid. We, as a country, are being made to look a joke. And whilst this problem, as said in the report, is decades old, one of the big problems is that it can be noted, and was partly noted, was the rise from 2018 onwards. And especially the rise in unknowns, like where people were more afraid, it seems, or they just weren't. They were taking a look at it. People were going to make a report, and then they were being advised not to, and this was happening more often. These are things that aren't just my opinions laid out in the report. But if you can tell me that Boris Johnson's tenure as Prime Minister has nothing to do with the increase in the problems just before the pandemic hit and during the pandemic, then if you can, then I would love to see it. I would send me PDF links, and show me what the evidence is. Make a video yourselves. Show me what the evidence. Comment below. If you do agree with me, like, subscribe, again, comment. Like, this is driving me mad. It looks like there are going to be more videos on different subjects. I just thought I'd do an actual deep dive into the meat of what was going on here. So, this has been Shadow Eater and my daughter Specky. Blessed Thursday, everyone. Have a good day.